Hi, I would like to begin this presentation by saying I apologize for the quality of the video and how I had to video it, but I could not upload the software to my computer. It's a little outdated and it would not let me run the software that was provided that we had to download. So for my Theory Illustrated project, I chose Can Sublimity be invoked through today's art? Can good art today be beautiful, or is it a separate issue? My presentation's title is Sublimity in Contemporary Art and How It Compares to the 1800s. I'd like to start off giving a brief definition of what sublime actually means. According to the Tate Museum, during the 18th and 19th centuries, the sublime was associated in particular with the immensity or turbulence of nature and human responses to it. Now, this section of the definition from the Tate Museum is generally applied to landscape paintings. You'll see in my presentation once we get to contemporary art that I'd like to step outside the box and apply the term sublime to more than just landscape paintings. I think that now in contemporary time that the term sublime has evolved and grown into something that it wasn't during the 19th century. It's no longer just the storm in the background or the out-of-place lightning bolt or maybe the native standing in the background that's sublime. I think it's something a little different now. So let's continue. Consequently, in Western art, sublime landscapes and seascapes, especially those from the Romantic period, often represent towering mountain ranges, deep chasms, violent storms and seas, volcanic eruptions or avalanches, which, if actually experienced, would be life-threatening. And I'll show you a few examples of these in the beginning of the presentation to represent 19th century sublimity. Here's my first example. This is Caspar David Friedrich's Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog from 1817. This is a landscape painting that could be considered sublime. First of all, the character has his back turned away from the painting, so automatically the viewer is able to start thinking in his or her mind, what does this person look like? Is this person looking at the ground? Are they actually staring out through the fog? Also, the way Friedrich painted the landscape in the background is quite different than the normal landscapes that we're used to seeing during this period. If you look down around the edge of the cliff, his clouds are very wispy and roughly painted. I like to call this the painterly strokes, where it's pretty rough brush strokes. Things are choppy and it's not very smooth. This would be considered sublime because at the time it would be a landscape that was different than what was being produced. This is an example from the 19th century that's not a landscape that could be considered sublime. I'm trying to tie this in with the examples that I used from the contemporary time. This is Goya's Saturn Devouring His Son from 1823. Obviously, this can be considered a shocking portrait, but this is derived from mythology, and you see Saturn devouring his son in the painting. This is a person that's not of European origin, so he is some kind of not known race, and he is he's performing cannibalism, which is a very shocking thing in itself. So this painting could be sublime, could be considered sublime just from those basic things. Also, if we go in and look at the stylization of the painting, Goya paints very rough. It's not very smooth. His strokes, I mean, you can see his brush strokes in the painting. So it's not something that, like I said earlier, he also has very painterly strokes. Moving on to the next. Okay. Now we get to sublimity in contemporary art, and I'd like to begin with Damien Hirst's Prodigal Son. This is a work where there's actually a baby calf that was sliced into two and put into tanks of formaldehyde and exhibited as an art piece. First of all, the shock factor of most of Damien Hirst's works, to me, would make this piece considered sublime. It's something out of the ordinary. We're actually seeing the inside of the animal. We can walk around it. We can view it from different angles. Also, the sheer thought about an animal that's once living, now passed away, in a tank of formaldehyde, suspended, is just something in itself to consider as sublime. The next work of art from the contemporary period that I would consider sublime is Ron Mueck's Mother and Child from 1958. He is a hyper-realistic sculptor, and some of his works, if you walk by them in the museum, you could mistake them for actually a person standing there. With this piece, Ron depicted a mother who has just given birth to a child, and actually from a different angle you can see that the umbilical cord is still attached and inside of the mom, with it laying across the lower part of her belly. Again, the shock factor of these types of work make this sculpture quite sublime. For this piece, I'd like to consider not just the shock factor, but also the sheer realism of the piece. I believe that also could consider this sculpture sublime. Not this piece in particular, but some of other Mueck's piece. Like I said, you can go in the museum and you're practically standing next to a person, maybe just in miniature size, that you might mistake for someone real. I think his ability to create such sculpture with such detail really does set him apart, and could possibly have the potential to make some of his works be considered sublime in contemporary times. And for my last example in the contemporary time of sublimity, we have a Banksy painting. This painting is termed Breaking Out. It really does not have an official title, but when Banksy did his pop-up art show, it was kind of a surprise, he didn't really title any of his paintings, so they've termed this one Breaking Out, and the date is unknown as well. Now, I really like this one as an example because it's a scene depicting African Americans in a field. So it does involve the landscape aspect of traditional 19th century paintings that were considered sublime. So for this, I think it's really neat that Banksy cut out one of the characters and put her lounging, smoking a cigarette in the bottom right-hand corner of the frame. So this is actually taking a 19th century painting and turning it into a possible sublime contemporary piece, which I thought was very interesting. Very good comparison. To wrap it up, I do believe that sublimity has evolved from the 19th century into contemporary times. I also strongly believe that the term beautiful is very subjective. I believe that any person can have differences in opinion of what is beautiful and what is not beautiful. Do I think that good art today can be termed beautiful, and even graphic art pieces like Damien Hirst? There are certain things that, as art lovers, we come to appreciate no matter what the form of art is, because we know what goes into creating the piece. So I would say that any art today can be considered beautiful. It is just up to the viewer whether or not they term that piece beautiful or not. Thank you very much.